Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Hey, Mark, Kelly. Hey, we talked last time about what makes a good villain, and I wanted to get into that a bit more and find out from you. What do you think then makes a good PC? What makes a good player character?
You mean like character concepts and like what do I want to play? What makes it
Well, what do you find
interesting?
most intriguing? Yeah, it doesn't even have to be your own. If you saw somebody else's that you thought, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea. I like that.
Yeah. See, I've been playing a lot of role playing games for a long time, and I think it's really easy to want to play kind of the trope. Oh, I'm the hero, and I lost my family, and I'm out for revenge, or these kind of things. Like I remember one time I was doing that was on a podcast, and we're doing this one shot with these guys, and they handed us these kind of pre-generated characters or whatever, and my guy ended up being like a halfling cartographer. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I like dove into it, but I fed him a little personality, and he was assuming that he was the leader of this party when he's the cartographer. He's like this dude
Hmm.
with maps, and he's bungling around or whatever, but he's throwing his weight around like he's the head of the party and whatnot. But it was a one shot, and you had to have a little, and it was for a podcast, so you could actually listen to it. But that one was a lot of fun. It wasn't a character I came up with, but I was able to pour some things into it. So I think what I'd start with is, what type of campaign is this for? Are you trying to have fun, or is this going to be an ongoing, like with a one shot, it's a little bit different than if you're doing an ongoing campaign. And sometimes it's really more like, I want to have some fun. So we're doing one right now. It's set during World War II, but it's more like supernatural superpowers have been introduced and whatnot. And so our characters are going to end up with some superpowers. And as they say, hilarity will ensue. And so me and my friend Jody are playing this like older Jewish couple who are in France, and we're helping with the resistance. You know what I'm saying? And so rather than play your typical like, oh, I'm a commando, World War II, you know, fast roping behind enemy lines with a knife in my teeth, we are literally an old couple who fight all the time. But hey, we got to resist all this thing, and so that's how we kind of got involved. Is we were, the commando team was going to insert, and we're there to like help them and give them a place to hide, and we're trying to like get this scientist out of the country, and he's staying at one of our safe houses. So we worked it in, and it's hilarious because I just get to be an old crotchety dude and fight with my wife until we get powers, and away we go. So like I've enjoyed that a lot, but it's definitely a non-traditional, like,
Well,
I
let
played
me ask you.
paladins and I played magic users, and they were a little more stereotypical heroic. Does that make sense?
Well, let me ask you this then. Let's expand it out a little bit to something else, because I think we could all agree. Before I even ask you, Kelly, hang on just a moment. Just wait,
Wait for it.
okay?
Wait for it.
I think we can all agree that as we've grown, because we've known each other since, dirt was invented. We've known
Hmm.
each other forever. I met Mark when I was 2 years old, I think, something like that. I met Mark and his twin brother. We were playing with a sandbag at church.
Yeah, my memory's a little hazy of the
Yeah.
event, but your timeline might be off by 6 months or so. But yes.
No, I remember it. Yeah, yeah, I remember it. And Paul I've known actually a little bit longer than Mark, another one of our very good friends. Um, so I think we could all agree that we've seen each other grow over the years, grow up and become the people that we are. And from what we liked originally as a protagonist, as a main character, if you will, whether it be in a movie, book, whatever it is, to what we like now has kind of changed or at least become more nuanced. Would you agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that when you're younger, you're kind of, you're just feeling your way in the world. You're just trying to figure out what you do like and the things that are flashy and cool to you and all that. You try to explore those.
Right.
But
Well,
then
how
as
many
time
kids in the
goes,
in the 70s and 80s had a character that was just like Elric, or that was just like Mad Mardigan, or that was just like, you know,
or a
that
ninja.
or Nick. See, kids don't understand. My 10-year-old has just discovered like Ninja Turtles. They were watching a cartoon because his older sister was watching that, and I was just telling him, I was like, I remember when it was a black and white comic, and I started on that, and we were at church this morning, and I grabbed his little sketchbook and drew a Ninja Turtle, and he's like, you know, and people just don't understand that
how easy it is to draw them.
how easy it is to draw a Ninja Turtle, but B, that the 80s, like, ninjas were it. You know what I mean? Like, ninjas were in everything. And it was just so pop culture.
I remember,
that's when Daredevil started had ninjas in it, and
you wanted to order the tabby boots. You wanted to get the claws for climbing.
That's right, yeah.
The ninja stars, the throwing stars.
I had a bunch of ninja stars. I had a ninja outfit.
Anything that had to do with it. And the sad thing is that now we know none of that was actually a real ninja thing.
Yeah.
It was really just them being kind of like the CIA in old feudal Japan.
Yeah.
That was it. Instead of this cool mystical force.
One time as an adult, right? Because remember, you used to get like Kung Fu magazine, and in the back they would have the catalogs pages from Asian World of Martial Arts, which is where we'd order like our nunchucks and our sais, all the cool ninja, in the 80s, like, martial arts and ninja stuff. You guys don't understand, if you weren't alive then, how awesome all that stuff was. And one time I was in Philadelphia on business as an adult. I was in like late 20s, early 30s or something. And I looked it up. Turns out right around the convention center is where Chinatown is in Philadelphia. And I went to Asian World of Martial Arts because I used to order from them when I was a teenager, and I get to go in, and it was your typical retail store selling all the ninja stars and stuff like that. But I made the pilgrimage as an adult to see the
purveyor, the purveyor of such nonsense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, an iconic purveyor of such nonsense. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've seen ourselves grow up and become obsessed with, and then move on from, or maybe get a more nuanced look at as we've gotten older. All those things. And so when I'm talking about what makes a good protagonist for you, I'm interested to see what you say, because it can be so unexpected in ways. And the reason I say that is I remember, and I think we've talked about this at one time in the past, the game that really did it for me was when we played the Babysitters, the teenage girl babysitters.
Yeah, that one was so fun. So to set the stage, I forget the actual like system that it was or anything. But
it was Palladium. I thought it was
Palladium? I'm not sure. But we ended up playing this one where we were all like 13-year-old babysitters hanging out at the mall, and it was very Stranger Things before Stranger Things was Stranger Things, and like we got looped into this like supernatural thing, and being like role players, we played all these things. My buddy had on his character sheet, like with the contents of his purse, and it was like assorted Madonna tapes, and cigarettes and a gun, So there's some stuff that some 13-year-olds hauling a gun
his list. His list was awesome, and I miss that dude. He was so weird, but so cool. It was just such a good guy. At the same time.
We showed up to the mall, and these boys were in our spot, right? So my buddy Paul goes, "Well, I walk up to the first one and put my cigarette out on his forehead." Yeah. Oh, we were in stitches. Like that was one of the most funnest role playing sessions we've ever had.
Yeah, it was awesome. And you weren't this mega powerful anything, none of that. But it really gave us the opportunity to expand. This must sound kind of like what it is for an actor or something. You feel stupid saying this. But it expanded our options for doing the role-playing thing. And once you got a taste for it, you were like, oh, that's actually pretty cool, exploring this whole new area that I hadn't been in
I hadn't
before.
actually thought about. You're right, but that was probably the first time we weren't playing heroes, that we came up with this concept for what would be a cool hero to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're right. That does make sense. And there is a role-playing game that's come out recently called Kids on Bikes. And essentially it's a Stranger Things kind of role-playing game. And I played it, one session, and it's a really cool, like if you're looking to jump in and do that kind of thing, and it's got some of the tropes like who's the nerdy kid and who's this in the group or whatever. That one might be fun. We try that for a one shot for our group or something, but
Yeah,
And I
it's
know
one
there's
of
a
the,
Stranger Things like D&D set and whatnot. So
it felt when we played that, it felt kind of like a palate cleanser, to be
Hmm.
honest.
yeah,
Because you play, okay, what am I going to play? And then you're going through in your mind, you got the Rolodex list of, paladin this, super warrior that, or, magic user who's got so many spells and all
yeah.
this
What
stuff.
flavor of fighter do I want to be?
Right.
Big
And
swords, small, fast swords, or that kind of thing.
and min maxing all your stats and all that
Right, right.
stuff. With this, it took away all that stuff, so you didn't have to worry about it, and then you were actually free to be creative.
See, that's
And
the thing. I was thinking as you started this. I was like, back in the day, I was very much a Munchkin min maxer, trying to wring the most benefit out of the rules as possible for my character.
to
Everybody
win,
does to
yeah,
win. Everybody does that. I get it. But as I've gotten older, I prefer rules light systems versus rules heavy systems. I'm much less interested in min max Munchkin gaming and more interested in the character. You know what I mean? Of course, you
Right.
want your characters to be competent and be able to do things.
sometimes it's
Yeah,
fun to play something different,
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I think that's the draw for a lot of folks, right? I mean, where do you go initially in any role playing book? Is you go back and you see who all the pre-generated monsters are, right? And you start looking at that, and then that informs how you want to generate a character. You start looking at what's the maximum die roll I can get for X, and how do you get it? I mean, and that's where. But if you start with like the skills list that are available, how often do you take some of those obscure skills, and how often do you actually implement them into the game?
Right.
Because every game I did when I was a kid was always focused on the idea of how can I create the biggest badass possible, which would often for me personally just blow up in my face.
Yeah, the way you roll dice, of
Yeah,
course. So
yeah. But you're right with the babysitter one, or the one that you did, Mark, where you came up with a character, but there's no die rolls. I mean, that was all handled by
yeah,
you as the DM.
yeah. So,
I think those things that like you say leave you free to sort of interpret the story in a different way becomes very important.
yeah. So one time we did a like a Drow campaign when the Menzo Berenzan set came out, and I think that was second edition D&D. And I just ran it a little bit different because that was the first time that every member of the party was a member of the same house. They were all family like related. Because a lot of times that's just not how role-playing groups work out. You know what I'm saying? And I did all of the dice rolling like for them. I was toying with a system because like in a D20 type system, you're like, oh, the higher I get, the better. But I've done competitive sport fencing and things like that, and so I'm a little familiar with like how real sword fighting works, and it's not always two skilled people. I was exploring a system that was a little more realistic from that standpoint, where I wanted it to be like, I wanted the scale to go past 20, and it was more like opposing die rolls, and the difference between what you rolled and what the other person rolled would determine, like, a dagger doesn't always do 1d4. You can kill someone with a dagger, but if you're 10th level in D&D, a dagger is never going to kill you because you have enough hit points. But in real life, you get poked in the wrong spot, you're going to die. You know what I mean? And there wasn't really a way to capture that in a role-playing game. So I was like, well, what if we had this kind of, opposed system where I'm going to roll my dice and you're going to roll yours, and if there was a big delta, that means it was a really, really critical hit and it would do more damage. Where if it was a little delta, that would take into account like some armor class and things like that, where it was like, oh, we're fencing back and forth and we're clashing swords, but nobody, we were too close. Nobody was getting through the defenses and doing damage. So it was a way to kind of try to emulate, kind of the tempo of more of a realistic fight than otherwise. So, but anyway, that was an experiment that turned into a really cool, like, role-playing thing. That was a lot of fun. I remember we did an adventure, and the only time somebody took out a sword was to pry open a door. You know what I mean? That was new for us because it was very hack and slash, like, let's go kill all of the monsters. Yeah. And again, I didn't have this grand plan, but I really appreciated how that worked out, and I was like, oh, that was fun, even though we didn't end up killing a bunch of monsters,
Right.
Yeah, and I find not to say that not even hack and slash, but not that action can't be fun and can't be really cool. Of course it can, but it can be boring too. It
Right.
really, I guess it really comes down to, are you able to tell a compelling story with that character? And if you're not, if it's just rote, then it just, even if they're the, Billy Badass, just the, otherwise what would be considered the coolest person in the world, it really becomes boring to me. Like, I've noticed people are starting to discover 80s movies more, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking at those. And they're talking about how, I've seen a lot of them talking about how the 80s were, I heard one of them say the 80s was the best era for movies because it seemed like the Wild West and you could make all these different movies and all that. There were some cool ones that came out. There were. But I also remember some that sucked, like Commando. Hate Commando. Just about any Chuck Norris movie you could think of.
What? Even Lone Wolf McQuade? Come on. That movie wrote the book for law enforcement.
Yeah, Eagle Force and all that crap and everything. Yeah, there was so many that I hated. I just think of Commando the most because that one just absolutely sucked. Blew on so many levels, right? An M60 with the ever lengthening belt of ammo.
Come on, they did that in Rambo too. Come on,
and the guy from Road Warrior. Which was a great movie, but by this time he was like, I don't know, it looked like he had been at Dunkin' Donuts a bit too long and had on that
chainmail tank top.
Yeah. So, movies like that and characters like that, I don't find compelling. What did he say? I
eat green berets for breakfast.
And all that crap. Come on, man. And that was when I was young.
All right, so what about
when
Predator?
I was a kid? But
you like Predator, but you didn't like Commando. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I hated Commando, and I love Predator.
Okay.
Predator was a deconstruction.
Right, agreed.
And that's the thing I think people miss on that. They don't quite get that. Is they think, oh my God, I've heard a number of them say this really cool movie, but it was like it was two movies and it was full of testosterone and all this. That was the point. It was made in the era of the action star. So on Predator, the thing is that all those characters were the stereotypical action star, right? And the action star was then, okay, what if we put them in this situation where they actually have something that comes from outer space and it's really, really is the top predator. In other words, the action star of space, the mega action star, comes to Earth. What's going to happen to, our Earth-based heroes?
Right.
And that's what made that one so cool. That was awesome. Because
and from a hunting standpoint, there's hunting deer and then there's hunting a predator, something that can hurt you. You know what I'm saying? And that I don't hunt, but I understand that is a different type of hunting versus I'm going to go out and kill an animal to eat it.
And it had all
I want to kill something dangerous, And
it had all the tropes in it. It had all the tropes that you would have in an 80s action movie. Every single one of them. The minigun in a backpack, like
carrying
that's
that thing around.
yeah, please. So, just so many things in that, right? But the movie was great because it then took that all apart. Yeah. The other thing that drives me, just as a side note, I know this is getting off the
when you're talking about role playing characters.
Well, no,
who's had a minigun?
Who's had
a minigun in their role playing character?
But just protagonists in general, right?
Yeah.
So the one part in that movie that I think other people really misunderstand as well is when they start shooting in the jungle. They all just show up and start rolling, with their ammo. And I've seen so many people say, well, why are you doing that? That's stupid. You're just wasting ammo and all. That is actually a tactic. Just because you don't know where the threat is, because you didn't see it. If your teammate is up there engaging you engage in that same direction up there, just leveling everything to try to get rid of them or take away their cover. That's an absolutely
and I don't know that we've ever seen that on film
tactic.
Before. That was one of those things that made it
that was
an
great
iconic scene that they were just like, I don't know what it is, but we're gonna pour some lead into it downrange and
Yeah, and that is a real thing.
And it worked because the predator was wounded.
Yeah, that's right.
That whole thing, it actually worked. So
and if it bleeds, you can kill it.
That's right.
Now you contrast Commando, which was awful, with the best movie ever made. Actually, two of the best movies ever made by the same filmmaker. You have The Thing, and you have Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Okay.
What makes that protagonist so good? What makes that protagonist so good? Same era. same
Mhm.
era, and you could argue the same kind of filmmaker,
And the same lead
but why
actor in
is
both movies.
Yeah.
and the same lead actor in both? But
I don't know that I've
why
ever played a
is that one
Russell.
so good?
Uh, I don't know if I've ever played an incarnation of him as one of my characters, though. Maybe Captain
I
Ron.
ran you guys through a game with the thing. I did.
Yeah.
That was where I introduced.
I wasn't there
OOT.
for that one. I remember you guys telling me about it, but I think it
My
was at
my
college or
character
something.
died. He blew himself up trying to blow up a rooftop.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
That
but
doesn't narrow
makes
down the
that
games very much, Kelly. He
protagonist-
blows himself up all the time. He did it in Boot Hill. He's done it in Top Secret.
Yeah, everywhere he
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
That's.
I had a
it's
lot of
always
bonuses
fun.
for me going for me in that on that game. I had a lot of explosive bonuses because I had taken all the explosive skills, and I rolled a natural one.
Yeah, that'll do it.
But what makes that protagonist so engaging in the Thing and in Big Trouble in Little China? Same actor, but two different characters, two very different characters. What makes them so engaging? Whereas Arnold in Commando is so off-putting. What makes the difference?
Do you have an answer in mind?
Oh no, I
or-
was waiting to see what you guys.
Okay.
I was
Well,
waiting to see
first
what
of
you guys
all,
thought.
I think Kurt Russell is hands down a light years ahead in acting than Arnold
sure.
Schwarzenegger. I mean, that's the obvious one, but that doesn't account for it. And somebody else
No.
playing that role in Commando, like Commando was basically written for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's just big hulking dude, and we open with him carrying a 50-foot log over one shoulder. Because he was like, oh, why cut it up into smaller
'Cause why
ones? And he's
not?
like, I'm gonna carry this big thing and whatnot. And so, well, again, I just think that Commando was so rote. These were archetypes or caricatures, if you will,
Mhm.
of what heroes were supposed to be and what bad guys were supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? All the bad guys were just, like awful and terrible and were murdering all these innocent people and whatnot. And he was so over the top. Oh, I got out of the military and I'm off in my cabin raising my daughter, off
I
grid
hate that
kind of
trope.
thing. It's
Yeah.
and again, this isn't Commando is not the only guilty party here. I can't tell you
No?
how many like books and novels from that day that I've read. It's like Vietnam vet goes off on his own and is kind of living in the wilderness away from people, and then something happens and it drags them back into the life and that kind of thing. So again, that was very topical for the time. But again, one is not meant to be, it's just an excuse for him to run around and kill a whole bunch of people. I got to save my daughter. Let me go murder everybody. It was kind of a race, you know what I mean? Because when that plane landed, they were going to discover his escort, died on the plane, so he had, so it was, that was the setup
movie.
over there.
It's a dumb movie.
But I mean, you said it right. I mean, in Commando, it was made for Arnold. I mean, everybody was just being exploitative of what Arnold represented. They just wanted the big muscly character and just a vehicle for him to do things, right?
Do
And
mayhem, yeah.
right. And that would put butts in seats, and that's all it is. In Big Trouble in Little China, in The Thing, and in many other movies, characters had more depth. There were more facets to the character that.
But which facets for Kurt Russell in The Thing made him so much more engaging? And I know which ones
let
personally.
me give you
had
a couple of examples.
Go ahead.
It's too many
Go
people
ahead.
talking. I'll start. So let's start with The Thing, right? So Kurt Russell in that, right? We open on them in this big research base in Antarctica, and the first time we see him, he's sitting in his little hooch up on the way, playing computer chess and drinking
Right.
some booze. And then when he loses chess, he destroys this computer by pouring alcohol in it and accuses the computer of cheating. Right. So that
in
is
a
our
very
character.
casual way.
Right. So that is our character introduction of this.
Yeah.
He's a very cool dude. He looks cool. He's doing smart things. He's playing chess. You know what I mean? Yeah, he loses or whatever, but then but you know what I'm saying?
Like
Like,
things and losing at it.
and losing it. But you know what I'm saying? Like that is
Right.
showing us a character like,
Yeah.
I'm stuck in the
Because-
South Pole. I got nothing to do. I'm playing some computer chess, but He's like, oh, this computer's cheating, and he's just destroying it with alcohol, which you would never do. And you know how much those things cost back then, or whatever. But we've introduced him as like it was hilarious. But that was a we're learning things about the character and even the other characters in that movie. Right. The black guy on the roller skates, and they tell him turn the music down, and he just kind of waves at the boombox like, sure, I'll turn it down. He doesn't. Little things like that just show here's these men who are trapped in a research. They got to get along. They got to be there for months and months and months. But they're also, giving each other a hard time or whatever. Like, hey, whatever. I'm gonna play my music loud. That is all characterization on how these men interact. With Commando, there was no characterization of how he reacts with anybody else. Not really. Right. Maybe his daughter a tiny little bit, but here we're seeing him like people look to MacReady and he's like, hey man, we need to talk. And let's go outside. And he's like, it's 20 below. He's like, we got to go talk outside. They're coming to him because he's the leader, even though he's not really the leader, right? There's people who are in charge, but they look to him in a leadership role, and he assumes it, even when he has to threaten to blow the whole place up because he was wrongfully accused or set up to be one of those things or whatever. And like I said, A, the charisma he brings to that role, but B, they didn't make him just like some lunkhead hero that just wants to murder everybody. They're trying to figure out what the thing is and who is it and who isn't it, etc.
Right. It's one of those things where in both movies, Sean, I think what I see is the character evolves with the movie itself, right? You start out at position A. When we talk about the Thing, MacReady has no idea. Nobody has any idea what the Thing is. They don't know what it is. They don't know how it interacts. But throughout the course of the movie, you see these people explore the world around them and evolve as characters through the movie. When you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger in most of his movies, almost all of them, it stays at one thing throughout, right? It hits one note and it just stays there the whole time. Because when you went to a Schwarzenegger movie, you went to go see a big muscly character go do something, right? And in most cases, it was just to shoot up some stuff. But when you saw the Thing, it required something different from you and the other characters.
Yeah.
That's true. That's another thing. Like you're right. I think, seeing a Schwarzenegger movie, whether he's playing Commando or whether he's playing the Terminator, like it's the same character. He's going to destroy a bunch of stuff and shoot a bunch of things up. I don't think you go to a Kurt Russell movie knowing what you're going to get just because Kurt Russell's in it. Whereas I think for a Schwarzenegger film, or arguably a Stallone film, you know what you're going to get, and that's why you showed up for it. And they've even turned that up to 11 with those. What's the movies where they brought in all the action heroes together from the 80s? They just did a whole bunch. They did like
the
3 of them. Expendables, yeah. Right, because you know what you're going to get, and they're like, let's put all of that into one movie.
And the other thing was Mac and his hat. The hat that he had, MacReady, the hat he wore in the Thing was awesome. Yeah. So against type, and you looked at that and you're like, oh my God, that's ridiculous.
What a goofy looking hat. Awesome. But on him, I want one.
And it's because it was ridiculous, because it was that way, So there was a nuanced realness to him. Look, the movie still had testosterone in it. It's still a guy movie, sure. But it's not comically so.
Now, speaking of comically so, Big Trouble in Little China, I think one of the benefits of that is the camera, the point of view, we're focused on Jack Burton, but he's not the hero of the movie. Wang is, in my opinion. Wang has got to go get his girl, and he's got to do all these things. He's the sidekick, but we're focused on him like he's the hero, and that I think is one of the geniuses of that movie.
Well, I think for me, and I know you guys have, I think you've said the same thing. Right after we saw Big Trouble in Little China, I remember we were all saying that must have been based on a role-playing game. They must have played a game where that's what they did, because it came across like that. A lot of stuff in there. I mean, if you try to look at it logically, a lot of it doesn't make any sense. But it's fun, fast-paced. And it's like a DM is just running you through a series of events, with a very loose, overarching story. And it came across as that. And with Kurt Russell there as this goofball, essentially this goofball, who is the stereotypical 80s action star. However, he's not. He's not that good. It's like Kelly's playing him and rolling a bunch of ones.
Yeah, he's a long way from Snake Plissken.
Right. Yeah. It was, or he reminds me of like what Russell would be in a game that way. How'd you get up there? It wasn't easy, and then that's pretty much it.
Yep.
That kind of thing. That to me was just pure fun because it was making fun of itself and just having a good time. It wasn't expecting you to take it seriously, to be ridiculous seriousness. So if you look at that kind of, and the reason I bring those up is because for me, when we were playing RPGs back then, it was kind of like that. You would end up in games that were set in kind of a similar vein to one of those. And you started off with the wanting to be in the commando kind of one until you got exposed to these other nuanced ones where you realized you could have so much more fun in there, in that setting, and making a character a protagonist for yourself that wasn't going to be the icon of studliness and all this stuff. That was going to be more flawed and nuanced, and that made for a more incredible
even some
story.
of the role-playing systems that started to come out introduced a flaws mechanic. Like, if you give your character, these quirks and these flaws, it's kind of to help kind of push that process along. So I know Savage Worlds has that kind of thing. So.
I think though, in this discussion, I think when you talk about something like a role-playing game and the nuance of a particular character, I think that a lot of that in what we're talking about is really driven by the DM who's actually running a game. I mean, if you're the DM that's just going to run, okay, you're going to go in the dungeon and I'm going to try to kill you for the next 2 hours and you're going to have to just kill everything back, then you get what you put into it. So I think if you're going to do something that's more nuanced, it requires a DM that's actually going to match that. And
players who are interested in that as well. Everyone's got to be rowing in the same direction, or it's a hot mess. So
I agree, but we talked about the villain thing kind of in the last one to kind of focus on that. The player character side or protagonist side, for this one. Then we can talk about the DM stuff in the next one. I know we've touched on that stuff before, but just, to isolate it, to put the spotlight on it. But you're right. If you don't have these particular facets in that setting, you can't have a good story. If you're writing a book, you're making a movie, you're doing any of that stuff, and that's essentially what you're doing. You're making a movie, a mind movie, or writing it, with your friends and all that. It's a collaborative, impromptu sort of thing. But if you don't have those foundations, I think it's much harder or impossible to do if you don't have those things together. That's why I wanted to explore that a little bit, to see, well, what makes a good player character? Because we've each been in groups where you have people who will take time to make up someone who's against type or different or that kind of, and then you've had that one person who gets in there who wants to bring shadow into the game, and it kind of brings things down. It makes it harder to do that,
Right.
I mean,
recently,
if you go back to the movie reference that you made about about Big Trouble in Little China or The Thing, in each of those movies, you're taking characters outside their element, right? MacReady wasn't a person who existed to simply fight monsters, right? All of these guys were down there on science missions, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I mean, the flamethrowers helped, but.
Well, yeah, no, I mean,
doesn't hurt.
Yeah, flamethrowers and dynamite. I got this.
Yeah, it's standard issue for any Antarctic expedition.
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
But I think that's also an element. I mean, if you're going into a game and all you got again is just a big tough character where you've taken all the fighting skills, all the shooting skills, and that's all you bring to the table, I think that's an element though that you can massage out of a game if where you can dictate that the characters have to come from some random walk of life, and yet you're not just walking into every situation with a bunch of former Navy SEALs or special operatives with superpowers.
Well, see, but that's a thing that I don't like of forcing the characters to be a thing. So I'll go back to this World War II thing that Robbie is running. Because we just finished up a campaign. Robbie's going to be the DM, and he's like, okay, it's set in World War II, and
Good
he's
old
got this
Blobby.
idea that you either have to be like a commando or French resistance or whatever. Like if you're a female character, you have to be French resistance, and so we're very limited in what we can choose as our characters. And I don't understand that. I'm like, it's a role playing game. If I want to get together on Wednesday night and play with my friends, I want to play what I want to play. We're not going for historical accuracy. It doesn't matter. Like you can make up a justification if we want to have, some Gurkhas in there, if we want to have, some Americans, but it's set at a time frame where America maybe hasn't entered the war yet or whatever. Like there's plenty of ways to just make that happen because there's literally a World War II with superheroes in it, right? So it's not like we have to follow the exact timeline of things. So I've always been, if you're going to take your time and play in my game, you play the character you want. You know what I mean? And now, if we come down and agree to it, like, hey, we're going to do this drow setting where you're all members of the same family, I'm going to have buy-in from all the rest of the players who were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's try that. That sounds fun. Not, oh, I thought I was going to play a regular D&D campaign and I wanted to be like a dwarf cleric. No, you have to play, a drow of some kind or whatever. That's going to require some discussions. But once those are had and we're off to the races, I've always been, you play what you want. I don't have character restrictions, race restrictions, none of that. I'm like, especially if we're playing D&D, there's so much out there.
But I'm like,
play what you want, man.
One of my favorites was your drow campaign. I think you were running it.
I was running that one,
yeah. I think you were running it where you had us meet the queen, and I started making jokes about her having that cigarette voice, like she smoked for 50 years.
Yeah.
She was on the
matron mother of their house
queen.
was a non-player character. Come on, Sean, give us the impression.
Oh no!
My children, I got a job for you.
Pulling herself up off the toilet because she got pissed, attached to it like the alien queen. It got very weird, but yeah. Anyway, so any closing thoughts? Because we've been talking about it for a while, but any closing thoughts about what you think people should keep in mind when they're making a character, or when they're telling their players what kind of characters they want them to think of?
I think much like the villain thing, I think the answer is have a point. Right. I mean, when you're making your character, I think the question to ask yourself is why does this character even exist? Right. Just have a point for their existence. Something more than just the straightforward. That's what I think needs to be there.
Something more than the usual. Someone's got to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Or even I have an 18 strength or I have an 18 dexterity. To put it in D&D terms, like what are you going to min-max on? You're like, well, strength is really important when I'm doing damage, or dexterity if I'm trying to dodge or whatever. And you know what I'm saying? Like, what if you had 12 in both of those? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Or none of your stats were like terribly high. I'm using D&D terms, but the point is, are you a combat adventuring machine, or are you an interesting character who finds themselves in whatever this predicament is, and in some ways, like, role-playing games are set up for you to be the hero, so maybe you are this combat adventuring machine, but what makes you different from all of the other ones? What's your like your outlook or your thought process? And unfortunately, I hate to say it, paladins seem to be the only character class that tries to force a little something like that into the character from a rules mechanic standpoint, right? Because paladins are like, oh, I'm not here for treasure because I can't keep it anyway, or I'm going to donate it somewhere else, and these kind of things, and I have to live by this code. And some of the newer editions have multiple different like paladin codes, whereas before it was like you're not allowed to have fun or money or whatever.
Yeah.
But the thought process there, I think, applies. Like, okay, what is this character like? Why are you here? What are you doing? Go. Like I said, that's more fun to me, is figuring out like, I don't want an 18 strength, 17 dexterity, high wisdom score, max hit points. I could do that all day long, and it's, do I want to shoot them with bows or stab them with swords?
But, and if you're
what's interesting, and that cartographer was interesting. You know what I mean?
But if you're gonna have that character in there, right, with the high strength, the high dexterity, why are they even there? Ask yourself, why is this person even here? Right? Because wouldn't that person, I'm a soldier and this kind of thing, and I've got this background. Okay, then why are you attached to this? right? I mean, because wouldn't most adventuring
Because we
parties
met
be-
at the tavern, obviously. That's where
Right,
the
exactly.
adventures begin.
Yeah, so you're just that big tough character that's standing around in the tavern and then decides to go out with some bard and some magic user that can barely cast a spell because that sounded like a good idea, right? I mean, have a bloody point to what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to join in the first place?
I've always enjoyed, by the way, Mark, to let you know, uh, you're one of the people I enjoy watching play a lot. I like DMing games or GMing games that you're in a lot because I enjoy your interaction. You really do go out of your way to role play a lot of that stuff. You really do. And Kelly's character, although Kelly's character in the last one we did, that 40K game, Kelly's character was kind of like a mirror image of Kelly, which was,
I'm not sure how to take that.
Complete with the
Which
bodysuit and
was-
everything. The body glove. That's what
it
it is.
was. It was funny to watch that. It could be infuriating at times,
Kelly was
but
an
it was-
assassin in our 40K game, by the way.
but it was funny. He was the most apathetic assassin I've ever seen. He would do the bare minimum possible
I was
to
I was
follow
socially
the- not
promoted
to
out of
accomplish
assassin
the
school.
goal. Yeah, he didn't try to accomplish the goal.
That's
He was
right.
trying to do the bare minimum necessary to achieve what you asked him to do. That's it. Drew's whole thing about giving you the grenade here, give this to somebody who's going to be able to do something with it, and then him just
did.
handing it to some dude down in the galley there.
Here, use this.
That lone grenade coming out, boom, and then everybody gets killed.
But
But-
see, I think the way that you handle that though, right? Because I went into that. I mean, quite frankly, I hadn't played with you guys in a long time, so I join up, and part of me is just sort of sitting back observing, right? And so when I get asked to do something, there's sort of a hesitancy of like, okay, wait a minute, I'm still trying to figure out the ropes here. But I think the way that you handle that, where I'm just handing off a grenade, and then you create some other mayhem out of that. I think it's easy, and I've been that DM a lot of times where a character does something you don't want them to do, and you can get frustrated, and the game just goes off the rails. But I think if you're creative in the way that you handle that situation, which I thought you were, it does expand the storyline a bit and causes something else to happen, which is quite interesting.
And don't get me wrong. When I say infuriating, I don't mean that you did it at all. I mean that was just your character.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
how you were playing him. It was. And trust me when I say I enjoyed watching you guys play that a great deal because it was all, you guys had applied the very things we were talking about in this, where you made a lot of very cool, interesting characters.
Drew
and
was
you
always bragging
applied
about coming from that death world,
getting his blood
Well,
stripes.
on a death world, this is like, Tuesdays. Sure, I can handle
with his
this.
solo blood stripes on his suit. Yeah. and that's what makes stuff like that fun. I loved watching you guys play the Sith because in that game I loved your interactions, and like I said last episode, I loved watching you corrupt Drew. When he's playing the Jedi, and even though you both know this is going to be his introduction into the group, you actually went to the trouble of debating it out and playing it out and all of that. And it was great. It was really amazing. It must have been like watching an improv class for someone who has been in that for forever and is good at it. It was just really well done. And so that kind of thing just can be very rewarding. And I think a lot of people outside of it, and a lot of people in it, don't realize that's an option. But a lot of people outside of it look at it like just a bunch of people, with the typical warrior and sorcerer throwing a magic missile and all that crap. And it can be so much more. So much more.
Mhm.
Well, that can
Yeah.
also be intimidating. Like I said, my 10-year-old wants to play D&D, so he's roped the rest of the family into playing D&D. So I'm running them, and they're all new. And my wife was very afraid to play a role-playing game because she's like, I don't know if I'm creative enough to do this. So her concern was, if I, do I have to come up with all these creative plans and ideas or act like a character? You know what I'm saying? So like,
Yes.
having never played, she was very concerned about that and was watching like podcasts of other people playing and stuff. And but again, I think you don't need all of that. A lot of role playing is
She's
not
a school
role
teacher
playing.
or something, isn't she?
She is a school teacher, actually. So.
Yeah, all the
and
prep work
she's
for
doing
something that
fine.
requires none. Yeah.
Right. Well, you should see. That's a whole other story. She's literally taught a Sunday school class this morning, and she's been making puppets all weekend, and like she really dives into this teaching thing like full bore. So it's kind of cute to see. But watching the newer people figure this out, like because the 10-year-old is the one that wanted to play, and like his sister's there, and his mom's there, and some other people. And we start to play, and everybody's trying to protect the 10-year-old because he's playing like a halfling thief, and his character is young like him as well.
Right,
and
right.
I had to stop everybody and be like, "Look, guys, we're here to play D&D. Let the kid play D&D.
Yeah.
You know, if this was a real 10-year-old who was your son or your brother, yes, you'd want to protect him and maybe not let him sneak up into the danger to see what's going on." But this is D&D, and he wants to do it, and you know, you guys being overprotective is squashing his.
Yeah,
you know,
you got to be able to learn that stuff.
Yeah, and he wants to steal from everybody because he's a thief and he has the skills to like steal everything. And I'm like, that's going to get him into so much trouble. He just doesn't know it yet because I have no problem coming up with the consequences of your actions in game terms or whatever. But they've taken that to heart. You know, I had to be like, whoa, everybody slow down, let the kid play some D&D. So, but it was an interesting dynamic, you know what I mean? Because how many times in D&D are you worried about the safety of another player?
Right.
Like you're like, whatever, get in there and do your job. But having this like, you know, little thief urchin that was adopted by one of the other players who's now a member of the party, which is kind of his background. They are being protective of him, but he's wants to get in there and do stuff. So like I say, there's some of those interpersonal things. I think it's another thing we haven't. So many times we're strangers who met at the Adventure Begins Here Bar and Grill, and
Right.
off we go. Or if we're being creative, we all got hired to guard this caravan that is heading into town where the adventure is going to start. Those seem to be a lot of the, you know, how we ended up together as an adventuring party where we're going to spend the next 20 levels. Why can't you be related? Why can't you be, what is your relation to these other people? Can really change the aspect of the party. You know what I mean? Because normally it's just strangers, you know, and
that's a good aspect of it. And I think we'll end on that, is that if you take the time to do something like that, creating a common history where it's not the group came together just now, you know, but maybe create a common history where you've been together for years or you've known each other or something like that. Yeah. Can help to create that cohesiveness of a team that you would hope to have with friends that you go on an adventure like this with, you know. So think of, again, like you were talking about with Stranger Things, you know, and also like in Stranger Things, if you're going to play a game like that where you're the babysitters or you're doing something like that, you have to have a rule in there apparently where if you're in trouble, you get an automatic out, an automatic save. If you can remember all the times that you were in the photo booth or shopping at the mall with your friend, and that love will conquer everything, apparently.
That's right. And it will, just like in real life.
Yes. Tiamat herself will, give up because love conquers all.
That's right. So, I'm going to eat you. Oh, you love someone? All right.
Dang it. Kate Bush is playing. You're going to get away.
Oh, man.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. I will see you boys next time.
Yep.
All right, bye.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.